what you acknowledge and appreciate wants to duplicate. Anybody can get a deal, but to keep a relationship and get their business for the rest of their life takes work. Writing a card to somebody is one thing, but how I show up in that relationship is so much more important.
Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Remington Ramsey. We are officially in the top 5% of all podcasts globally. And it's because we have amazing guests like Mr. Thank You, John Israel. John, welcome to the show.
Remington, I'm excited to be here.
You're known as Mr. Thank You. You're Mr. Gratitude. You're going to coach us on how to write a proper handwritten notes. You spend most of your time on real estate stages, but you're actually going beyond real estate now. But you made your niche in speaking to real estate crowds. How did that all start?
Yeah, so my start, Mr. Thank You, the name where it came from is my gifting agency. So we have a professional gifting agency. We help real estate professionals, mortgage professionals, home builders, a variety of different industries, love on and appreciate their most important relationships with some type of a gift. So I'm kind of like a professional Santa Claus, right? So like we help people give away gifts for a living. So that started really in the real estate and mortgage space. And we began that business at the perfect time to do anything in real estate, which was 2009. As everybody knows, best time to get in real estate. So it was really hard in the beginning. And over time, eventually we built a really good book of business. So by 2016, I was in a great place. And ultimately, I had everything I wanted on paper. I was married. We bought our first house, had our first child. But I was over it. I was overworked, overwhelmed, and just so unhappy. I was ready to walk away from all of it. And I'll never forget, I came home from work one day and my wife was sitting on our couch, nursing our infant son in one hand and handwriting thank you cards in the other hand to some people who had supported her during her pregnancy. And Remington, I know we were talking earlier, we both have young families, and it's, you can understand like that it would arguably be one of them, like a beautiful scene. But I was so overwhelmed with my job, I couldn't even appreciate it.
Oh, wow.
And it was like this moment where God spoke through my wife and said, John, if you can't appreciate what you have now, who's to say you'll be any happier when you finally get what you say you want? And that was a moment really that my life changed. And I realized how much I was taking for granted in my life. I mean, I had everything I wanted, but I truly couldn't appreciate anything. So I started this project where I committed to handwrite 5 thank you cards every single day for 365 days in a row. And that turned into a book and then a TED Talk and now a global movement. So what happened is I started to realize that, well, yes, I sold gifts for a living. Like that's a product. It does help people make more connections and express gratitude. But truly, I wasn't living gratitude, which was the value of our business. So this project really taught me in a very experiential way how gratitude can become a competitive advantage, because everything grew that year. Our relationships, my sales, my averages, reduction of cancellations, so many things happened that I started to share these ideas with my clients who were real estate agents, loan officers, and then they started offering me to speak at their company meetings and local chamber of commerce and things like that. And then it just kind of blew up from there. So now I get to speak at, national real estate conferences and, local events around the country. So it's truly, honestly, like real estate has kind of been the backbone of my business for the last, 15 years.
A lot to unpack there. You said you wrote 5 cards every day for an entire year, 365 days. Did I hear you right? So that's 1,825 cards at the end of the year.
It is.
How did you determine who to write them to?
It's a good question. So, because there's a couple of rules to it, and this is important to know. So there are 4 rules to the project. One is 5 cards had to be handwritten every day. So they couldn't be a text or a video or email.
You could definitely cheat on this project and feel good about yourself, and you shouldn't.
Yeah. And the second rule was that I could write a max of, or every day reset at 0. Okay. So I couldn't skip 3 days and then write 20 cards in a day. Third rule, I could write a max of 3 cards per any one person. And this is because, I know myself, and if I can think of someone to write a card to, I might write the 75th thank you card to my mother, which who knows, maybe she would have appreciated that. But part of this idea was to explore my capacity to experience and express gratitude, which means looking for different people every day. So I started by making a list of who I knew at some point I would write a letter to. And I think I got to about 350 people on that list. And that went back to like high school teachers, coaches, mentors, authors that have influenced my life, clients, anyone I could think of. So I had a backup, but the goal was every day to find 5 people doing something noteworthy and then to write them that note. And so it was kind of this interesting experience of having to forcefully look for people doing something good, which, by the way, after the fact, I did all the research on this, and it's an interesting thing to realize. Gratitude is not a natural thing. Gratitude and happiness are distinct reasons for that, which is you don't have to teach a child how to be happy, but you do need to teach them how to be grateful.
And you're saying this is scientific? You, after your research, like this is a science proven people are not naturally like filled with gratitude?
Yeah. Well, specifically, it's called a negativity bias. This is a psychological term where we're prone to look for what's wrong before we look for what's right.
Why is that?
Because when you think about back in the cavemen and cavewoman days, we survived because we would hear a growl behind a rock, and we wouldn't assume it's a cute little kitty cat. We would assume it's a saber-toothed tiger, and we would run away, and we would live to see another
constant fight or flight.
And so, but now here we are in modern day America, we don't have to worry about saber-toothed tigers, but yet the world, especially the media, knows that we have this negativity bias, which is why when you wake up in the morning, you pick up your phone and you see, here's everything bad that happened in the last 24 hours on the planet. Good luck at work. Don't bring any of this with you. But we can't. So we're prone to look for the negative. So the challenge that was so interesting was I was, for the first time, having to override that mechanism and have to look for people doing something right and then write them a note. So it was a really interesting challenge.
Yeah, I mean, in doing so, if you're going to find 800, I mean, even if you write 3 to everyone, that's still close to 1,000 people that you're writing one to, maybe a little less, but you got to constantly find new people to be doing life with enough to send them a card. Now, I'm sure there was things where it's like maybe someone that you hadn't seen since high school and they come to your mind. I mean, what were the most advanced grouping of people that you found yourself writing to in that year?
I'll give you 2 completely different ends of the spectrum. So, and here's how simple this can get is when you're challenged to do this. So I started in October of 2016. And suddenly it's December of 2016, right? And so we moved to this brand new neighborhood in Dallas, Texas. And I'm walking with my 2 young boys at the time. So one's an infant, like 2 months old, and one is 3 years old. So we're walking around the neighborhood, and some people decorate for Christmas. And my son would jump out of the stroller and he'd run over and he'd start yelling out the colors of the lights. He's like, blue, red, yellow. And it was one of the most adorable things that gave me joy. And I thought, you know what? I need to thank this neighbor because Remington, do you decorate for Christmas?
Much against my will.
Right. So here's what happens. Every year at the end of Christmas, people take down all the decorations, and here's what goes into their head. Do I want to do this next year?
I'm never doing. No, I'll take it a step further. I'm never doing this again. Right. Is what you see this little nutcracker above me? That's my contribution to the household decorations right there.
So check this out. So I imagine that must be the case. And so, but yet it brings so much joy to the neighborhood, right? I just saw it. So I wrote every neighbor who decorated for Christmas that year in our entire neighborhood. There's a lot of people. We live in a pretty suburban neighborhood. And I just thanked them. I said, I can imagine it must have been a real hassle to put up your lights. But I just wanted to let you know that when my son and I walked by your house, he jumped out of the stroller and was screaming out the colors of the lights on your house. And it brought me so much joy. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for going out of your way to do this, because I know it was a lot of work, but I wanted to let you know that it brought a lot of joy to our family. So,
yeah, let me make an observation real quick, John, because I think that as business people, you come from the sales world, you come from owning your own business, you still do. I feel like it's a really easy thing to always think about, how does this advance my sales? How does this advance my business. And so if you were to sit down and say, hey, this guy, I heard a podcast, this guy named John, Mr. Thank You, said, write 5 note cards. And you know that he speaks on real estate stages, you think, well, cool, then I'll write to all my clients, I'll write to prospects, I'll write, and that's where your head goes. I think what's cool about this story you just shared, like the first story you shared had nothing to do with your business. The freedom that comes with not thinking, hey, how do I get ahead in the world by writing this? Just writing specifically for the sake of gratitude, what that does for your own heart and the way that you approach life. I think there's something to be said for that.
Absolutely. And this interesting thing is, so 2 moments with that, right? So I want you to imagine, Remington, that you're that person who just went through all that hellacious experience decorating your house, and you're like, I don't think I want to do it again. But then you go to the mail and you open the mailbox, and then you find this postcard from a neighbor who you've never met that just said all those things. What is your desire now to go do that again next year?
Hey, much higher.
Right. And so here is the lesson, which is what you acknowledge and appreciate wants to duplicate. If people feel appreciative for what they do, they want to do that again and again and again because somebody sees it and it's valuable. This is a super relevant business lesson, because when you think of working with your team or just vendors in your industry, those that are grateful for the relationship, that express it continuously and notice the hard work that we do, they're just individuals that we're attracted to. They're individuals that way like, man, I just feel good being around this person. And naturally deals flow in that direction. And I think that was really, for me, one of the big heart changes. I love that you use that word, because I was a very transactional salesperson. I mean, I was great at my job. I could get tons of clients, but I wasn't very good at keeping relationships, because I knew how to say what I needed to say for you to feel a certain way, to give me your business. And then after that, I'm moving on to the next person. And so this is a thing that we all need to learn in business, is that anybody can get a deal, but to keep a relationship and get their business for the rest of their life takes work. And that kind of gives me like a little quote that I share with audiences, which is, great relationships aren't meant to be, they're made to be. Great relationships aren't meant to be, they're made to be. Sometimes we think like, oh, well, if it's meant to be, it should be. Or like, hey, they haven't called me in a while. We put so much of the relationship pressure on the other person. But if we take responsibility for the success of the relationship, we have the highest likelihood to influence that relationship in a positive way. So that's my thought.
You know, I'll take it a step further. So I also subscribe to the note card. I remember 7 levels of communication. Michael Mayer used to talk about writing a power note, a handwritten note with a specific purpose. He coached you on how to do it. And I do want to, don't let me forget, I want you to coach us through a John Israel note card. So we're going to get to that. And I was like, you know what, that's really good. And what I realized, and I got away from it, and I wrote this piece. I just went live on Facebook because I felt called to, because I felt very convicted about having a bad day, quote unquote. Like whenever we're having bad days, I've found that in the business world, 99% of the time, at least my bad days, and we're excluding like life events happening and really terrible things that could happen to contribute to a bad day. Just a normal, people don't like me and someone hung up on me kind of day. Normally, if you're feeling negative or having a bad day, it's because you're self-involved and you're focusing more on what's going on in your own world. And the easiest way, the quickest way to feel better or not be having a bad day is to focus on impacting others. And so what I said is like, hey, I challenge you to write, and my number was 5 as well. If you write 5 handwritten notes, I've literally done this before. If I'm having a bad day, I just start loving on other people. Before you know it, by like the 3rd note card, I'm having a pretty good day, because like I'm all jacked about like impacting somebody else. I'm picturing them, like you said, reading the note. I'm picturing our relationship, and I'm thinking about all the good things that led us to the point where I can write the note. And so I love what you're doing, and I love what you've done, and I want to get to what's happened since then. Before we do that, I said there was a lot to unpack in the first thing you said. I'm curious. You had mentioned in that setting where your wife was writing, and life was good, except you were so bogged down with I don't know. The word you used, it wasn't chaos, but you weren't enjoying your business. You felt overwhelmed by it. What was contributing to that?
I think for me, it was this, what I call chronic achiever syndrome, which is, I'm pretty good at setting a goal and achieving it. And it's this thing that, I don't know if you can relate to this, Remington, but as a goal-driven person, it's like, oh, I want to hit the next thing. So it could be an income goal. It could be a sales goal. And it's like, okay, I'm going to, I'll finally be happy and fulfilled when I finally hit that number, because that's a big deal to me. And then you hit it, and then you get there, and there's a moment, right? There's a moment where you're sitting there with your accomplishment, and the question is, how do you feel? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is going to be one of two things. One is, what's next, right? Where are we going next? Or the other part is what I could have done better. And what I mean is, it's this experience of, this is maybe a personal story, but I remember as a kid, I came home from school one day, and I had my report card. And it was the best report card of my life. It had 5 A's and 1 B on it. And the 1 B was in a weighted honors class, so it counted as an A. So I brought it home, and I'm showing it around. I'm like, oh, check this out. And I bring it to my dad, and I say, Dad, check it out. And he looks at it, and his response is, what's with the B? Yeah. And I think there's probably a lot of high achievers who can relate to this story in some way, shape, or form, because in so many ways we've kind of, whether it's a family thing or just a development thing, we just are trained to feel like whatever we accomplish is never going to be enough. We're always going to find our own fault. And so I think that's what was just eating me alive. So I do have a word for it now, Remington, and we call it perpetual discontentment. Perpetual discontentment, which is the never ending feeling that what isn't enough. And that actually became probably one of the most interesting challenges of this year. Is, while it sounds so simple, and yes, most every real estate coach will tell you should write handwritten cards, because as a strategic tool, it will make more connections than if you don't do it. But the point for me was not about writing the cards. This is an important statement, which is the goal was to explore my capacity to experience and express gratitude. So another way of saying that, Remington, is, where do I not want to feel grateful, and how can I bring gratitude to that area of life? That's where things just went off the rails of like life-changing experience that I didn't expect. But that was an interesting fact of, for the first time, forcing myself to look for the good.
You said, where do I not naturally want to feel grateful? So an example of that would be like your neighborhood. You're not naturally going out of your way to tell your neighbors thanks for putting up lights. Is that what you mean by that?
Well, so as a I'll give you 2 scales of that. Yes, that's on a scale of neutrality, where I was like, I don't really think about it. It's not like I'm not necessarily grateful, but I'm also not angry with it. But on another side, I'll give you like a short story that's like kind of illustrates this. So I'm a graduate of a small university in Washington State called Gonzaga University. All right. A lot of listeners have probably heard of Gonzaga. We're mostly known for one thing.
March Madness?
Basketball. Yeah, exactly. So
the mustache man.
So check this out. So during the project in 2017, my team, the Gonzaga Bulldogs, make it to the NCAA National Championship. Crazy deal. Huge news for all alumni. I'm watching the game. We're playing the UNC Tar Heels, and we're winning most of the game until the last 90 seconds, and we lose. And I'm not a huge sports guy, but I always thought it was funny when you watch the Super Bowl, and at the end, there's always a video of the winning team downtown, the losing team. Winning team, everyone's celebrating and throwing confetti in the air. Losing team, everyone's flipping over cars and lighting trash cans on fire.
Setting it on fire, yeah.
And I never understood it until that day, because I was so upset. My team loses the game. So here's this interesting thing. It's 9:00 at night. My wife puts the kids to bed. I'm sitting at my desk. I haven't written any cards. And Remington, I couldn't do it. I couldn't harness an ounce of gratitude because I was so upset that my team lost. And it brought up one of the most interesting questions I had to learn to answer, which is, how do you be grateful when you don't feel like it?
Mm-hmm.
That question has a universe, and the best, and what I'll go to is the definition of gratitude. This is by Dr. Robert Emmons from UC Davis. He's a foremost researcher on gratitude and the positive life and health benefits. So his definition is, gratitude is the emotion one feels when receiving a gift or experiencing something as a gift. So what does that mean? Someone gives you a gift unexpectedly. You didn't necessarily do anything for it. It's not even your birthday. how do you feel? Joy, excitement, whatever that feeling is, that in essence is gratitude. But the other part of this definition is the experience of something as a gift. So what means is your interpretation. So as an example, for any listeners here who've ever been in a relationship of, early on in life that ended, that's a tough time, right? When you get out of a big relationship, it's like, oh, life is over. Women are terrible, men are terrible, whatever. But however, with time and perspective, we can look back on our previously painful experiences and we can say, I'm actually really glad that happened. I'm so glad that happened because of all these things that I learned about myself that I couldn't have learned any other way. I'm so glad that relationship ended because I wound up meeting someone that I married, that I started a family with. So I can actually feel gratitude in this moment from a previously painful experience. And the question becomes, how long does it take somebody to feel gratitude from a previously painful experience? And the answer is as long as it takes you to find the gift. And the point is, in every life experience, there is a gift, but it's your job to find it. So let me button up the story, which is,
yeah, I'm waiting to find out who you actually wrote the cards to. Was it the coach of UNC? I'm waiting with bated breath.
So what happened is I started thinking about this. It's 9:00 at night, and I just had a real revelation. And I think, oh my gosh, I didn't watch my team lose a national championship. You know what I just watched? I just witnessed the best team in school history play the game of basketball. That deserves to be celebrated. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to write a handwritten card to every player of the Gonzaga men's basketball team and the entire coaching staff.
That's awesome.
I totaled out, it was about 35 people. So for the next 7 days, I'm scouring the internet for every player's specific contributions, their highlights, even the red shirts got a card.
Specific. Okay.
So every card was specific. Even the red shirts said championship teams are not made in the championship game. They're made in every practice that led up to it. So thank you for helping our team be the best in school history. So Remington, it's crazy. It goes from this moment of, it didn't take months, weeks, or days. I'm talking minutes from upset, anger, this shouldn't be happening, to feeling pure and authentic joy. And the crazy thing is, 2 months later, I forget I even do this because it's like Groundhog Day and Mr. Thank You Land, right? Every day is new 5 cards, new 5 cards. May 21st on my birthday, I'm out to dinner with my wife. And she says, oh, something showed up for you in the mail today. And she hands it to me, and it's an envelope from Gonzaga men's basketball. And I open it up, and inside, Remington, is a handwritten card from Mark Few, the head coach of Gonzaga men's basketball.
Wow.
Thanking me for every letter that I wrote the team, thanking me for being a loyal alumni, and thanking me for showing up with hope and gratitude during a challenging time. And bro, I've got that. So for any of you who are watching this on video, behind me is what's called my gratitude wall. So I actually have that card still here. So it is.
You keep it close. It's always behind you.
Dude, for those of you who don't know who Mark Few is, he was one of the head coaches of the U.S. men's Olympic basketball team this year. Gold medal winner. Dude has every sponsorship known to man. Nike, all the big companies want to work with him. And of everything he could do with his time, he chose to send me, some random alumni and fan, a handwritten card. And I couldn't have paid this guy to do it. And I think that's the nature of why gratitude is so impactful, is because at the end of the day, it shows us what we all really want in a relationship, is we just want to be seen. And we want to be seen for our greatness rather than our weakness, because we're always going to point out our flaws. What we really value is somebody who's going to be with us to point out our highlights.
It's an incredible story, man. It makes me wonder, now that you have, so you have all these stories, are you still keeping it up? Are you still trying to hit 5 a day?
No.
Okay. Yeah. So at the end, because that could be pretty tedious.
Yeah. Well, so if you read, for any listeners, if you read my book, what I do is I take pictures of the cards that I would write, and they weren't short. They were typically like a full page long. So this on average, this was actually, I didn't know this until later. I ran the numbers. It took me about 90 minutes every day to write these cards because I wanted them to be really like specific. And if you total that out, 90 minutes times 365 days, it works out to be 22 and a half straight 24-hour days of writing thank you cards.
Wow.
That is insane. And
that is insane.
So I write cards all the time now, but for me, it's less about, I've got to hit my cards every day, but it's more about that person really deserves to be appreciated. I'm going to do that. And so sometimes it is a handwritten card now. Sometimes it is just, I'm going to pause. I'm going to look at them in the eye and I'm just going to say, hey, thank you so much. I'm just going to tell them what I would normally write. So I think it's overall just more positively impacted my ability to just thank people as quick as I possibly can.
So we have a mutual friend, Rory Vaden, and he wrote Take the Stairs, and I had him on the show last week, and I asked him if he has ever gotten caught taking an escalator. And he hadn't been asked that before. I thought that was funny. That was the first thing I asked. If I'm at an airport with him, I'm like, you better be taking the stairs, buddy. You can't write that book.
The way that Rory Vaden and I met is on an escalator. And I'm not even kidding.
Up.
This was before he wrote the book. It was at the National Speakers Association in 2007. We're both there. We're both like 20 somethings. We don't know what we're doing yet. And I'm literally going down an escalator, and granted, he was running up the escalator on the other side.
So
and I recognized him. I was like, Rory, hey, we're supposed to meet. So anyways, I met him on an escalator.
That's fantastic. That's a great way. If I was following him around, I'm going to try to catch him on an escalator, but he's not. Yeah. He knows he's looking for it. But so the reason I asked that is because if you're known as Mr. Gratitude, Mr. Thank You, I'll tell you right now in my own life, like I film a lot of content and I have a lot of ideas and I tell a lot of people what works in my own life. And the first person who reminds me how I should be feeling about something is my wife. And she'll throw a video that I've shot in my face sometimes. And it's great. Oh. I need to hear that because, we're not perfect. And so, Mr. Thank You, I imagine there's times in your life where, you're not Mr. 1,800 note cards in a year. What happens for it to click and for you to get out of that natural way of thinking? I imagine you're pretty good at it, but does your wife ever remind you that you're Mr. Thank You?
Dude, what you just said is cut so deep. Because the other day I was complaining about something. I don't remember what it was. We were in the car and she just says, I once heard a speaker say, in every life experience there's a gift, but it's your job to find it. And I'm like, damn it. But yeah, no, I hear you. Yes, I mean it's totally hard. It's and I think that's the nature of I'll back up and give you a different lesson. The value for me in being Mr. Thank You, and again, my real name is John Israel. It's my actual name, but I know a lot of the world knows me as Mr. Thank You. But the thing that was actually more transformative than writing all the cards is now having to be consistent with someone, now having to be consistent in my behavior with what I said, right? And so as an example, you can't tell somebody, I love you. Nothing in the world means more to me than you, and then treat them like crap. You can't tell your clients that you value responsiveness and communication and then not respond to their text messages because they're kind of getting annoying. You can't tell your team how much you value and appreciate the hard work they put on a file, then berate them for a mistake that they make. You can't say one thing and then act differently, not expect an impact in the relationship. So I think the big takeaway long-term for me has truly been that, like, hey, writing a card to somebody is one thing, but how I show up in that relationship is so much more important.
Yeah.
Because if you write the letter, but then disappear in engagement, it's like, does he mean anything he says? That's the hard part that for me, I constantly have to work into.
Well, that's amazing. You've made a lifestyle out of this behavior, but for the sake of the podcast, you've also made a career out of the behavior because now you speak on stages, you coach, and your content stems from this year that you did something pretty incredible. So kudos to you for creating the community and all the success that you've had since then. But I am curious, when you were doing it, was this something that you knew would be the foundation for your speaking because you wanted to be a speaker, or was it something that came after the fact?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a fair question because there was I would say a few things there. I didn't know it would turn into what it did. I've always enjoyed public speaking, and I had a coach that I was working with at the time. And I just told him, I said, man, I'm talking about the same thing over and over. It's just the same stories. And
on stage, like specifically when you're speaking.
Yeah. And I said, I feel like I'm a broken record. And because I said, man, I have some epic stories from back when I was in college that I share about, but I'm now in my mid 30s. I'm married. I got kids. It's not this. I can't tell those stories anymore. And so to quote his words, he said, well, sounds like you need to do some epic shit. And that was all he said. And I was like, yeah, do something interesting and then talk about it. So that wasn't the driver, but it was like on my awareness. So when this idea of like the thing with my wife, and then this idea of living out your gratitude as a value, I didn't know what it would look like, but I was like, you know what? I think this is really important for me to do. And if something comes of it, I can talk about it later. Cool. But, yeah, it was subtly in the background of, I want to make sure that, I am speaking something that I actually do, that I live out, that I've experienced, not just that I've read in a book or that I have a theory about.
It's impressive, man. Where I'd like to end the interview is talking about what's happened since then with the people who've seen you on stage, because now there's been thousands, if not tens of thousands of people that have heard you give this message. Has anyone followed in your footsteps and written 1,825 note cards in a year?
Absolutely. Now, have they done 5 a day? I'm not sure. I would guess probably, but the people that I've physically spoken with who've talked to me afterwards when they're done with their year, because here's what happens. And I caution people here, which is they hear about the story, they hear my message, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to write 1,800 thank you cards for a year. And my response is, don't do it. It's really hard. It's going to take so much time. But here's what I say. I say, you know what? But here's the deal. I think that if I had to do it again, I would probably do it again with maybe 1 card a day or 3 max. And the reason why is because 5 was good, but that was probably at the top of the limit of what I could do and make them genuine, but it took a lot of time. 1 to 3 cards, I think, is very reasonable for most people. It's still going to be a challenge, but that's what I would do. So at the end of my messages, I always give everybody a 30-day challenge. I say, hey, my challenge to you is to just do this every day for 30 days. You don't have to do 5 a day. You can do 3 a day, 1 a day. Shoot, I don't even care if it's a text message or an email, but make the message pure, authentic, and directed to this one individual person, and just notice what happens. So that's my general challenge to people. But yes, I've talked to a friend the other day who heard about the message, wasn't a friend at the time. He was just someone who read my book. And then we've since become friends because he started his own journey. He did 3 a day every single day for a year. He's a mortgage loan officer out of the Bay Area. But yeah, lots of people have started their own projects, and it's fun. So, one of the next books that we're going to write is going to be a little level compilation of all the stories of other people who have started their own gratitude projects that heard about the story, so that we can kind of highlight what people do. Because, man, we've had companies start their own gratitude projects and write tens of thousands of thank you cards to their clients, their, family members and other team members. We've had schools take it on. There was a client, this was crazy. A client after a speech said, you should be in schools. You should be talking. Like, I have an 8-year-old and he needs this message. And I'm like, you know what? I'm great with adults. I'm not probably suited best for school audiences. She's like, no, you should do it. And I said, well, how about you do it? And she said, I'm going to do it. And so she went out and spoke at her son's school, and she sent me the photo. It was about like 20 kids. Here was the crazy thing. They loved it so much that the next year they asked her to come out. She spoke to the entire school at different stages. She did like 3 presentations that whole day, talked about the book. She got 800 students at this small Catholic school her kids go to, who all committed to do a 30-day challenge to write 1 card a day every day for 30 days. When I hear that, Remington, I'm like, this is my contribution. Like, we all have, I think, whether aware of it or not, we have a ministry being on this planet to do something positive with impact. I think I got really lucky figuring this out when and how I did, because I still write cards. I still do it. But for me, what brings joy is hearing and seeing other people go do their own version of it and have the trickle impact from there.
Sure. I can imagine. I mean, that's a kind of story that sends shivers up your spine, man. That's very cool that instead of taking that opportunity to just further your message personally, like, you're actually impacting people to then empower them to go out and do that. That's the dream. That's a speaker's dream. So kudos to you, man. Great stuff. Where can we find you? Where can we find you on the webs? Where can we find you on the stage? And what's the title of your book?
Yeah. So everywhere. So my website is mrthankyou.com. That's mrthankyou.com. Now book is Mr. Thank You Project. Now this is a fun fact, which is there is another Mr. Thank You on the planet. He's this crazy Russian influencer who has grabbed the handle mr.thank.you. And he is a completely different person on social media. And he like runs around with scantily clad women throwing money in the air. So here's the deal. On social media, everything is johnisrael.me. johnisrael.me. So if you'll see two different people. You'll see either some dude throwing money in the air, or you'll see a dude hang out with his family with chickens around him. And that's me.
Yeah. That's great. Well, it's been a pleasure learning about this journey, and there's so much more to the story that I know personally. We're going to have you on another time, but thank you for being on, and thank you for leading the way in what I think is a pretty incredible story of gratitude.
Thanks, man. And Remington, thank you for just the platform you have created to connect people, because ultimately, really, our mission at Mr. Thank You is about elevating the level of gratitude and connection on the planet. And whether you are conscious of it or not, you have done that at a very significant level for literally tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of real estate professionals all across the country. So I appreciate you, my man.
Man, I appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you for listening. If you want to impact who is on the show, just so you guys know, John is a great example. People wanted John on the show, and John's on the show. So if you want to impact who is on the show or what we talk about, email us at podcast@realproducersmag.com. Check us out on all the socials. And if you would like to launch a franchise, we could talk about that too. Email us again at podcast@realproducersmag.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.